Despite being blessed with sons named Joshua and Ethan, they became overly attached to Susan, who had filled their heads with falsehoods, leading them to neglect their parents. Sometime after Susan, Joshua, and Ethan were kicked out of the house, George passed away suddenly. When I informed Joshua over the phone, his response was unbelievable. "Your dad passed away. Leave the funeral stuff to you, Mom. I don't want to see the face of someone who kicked us out. Yeah, and we're having a great time here, so don't bother us. Just tell the relatives we can't make it because of work or something." I was dumbfounded. A week after the funeral, I received a letter from George addressed to me. When I opened it, it read, "Please read this without our sons finding out." As I read on, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Susan, who had trampled over our family life with dirty shoes, and Joshua and Ethan, who refused to attend their father's funeral. I won't let it end like this. My name is Alice, a 54-year-old housewife and full-time employee. I met George at a welcoming party for new employees at our associated companies. Despite being a light drinker, I couldn't refuse the alcohol offered to me and ended up feeling sick from drinking too much. As I shrank into a corner seat, looking for a chance to leave, George noticed me, struck up a conversation, and arranged a taxi for me. Later, I took a day off to thank him at his office. He was surprised to see me during his break. "Coming all this way just to say thanks? You're really conscientious." We became friends, started dating, and eventually got married. Both of us, George, who grew up in a complex environment, and I, who lost my parents as a child, longed for a warm family. We were sure that we could be happy together, but living together brought unexpected turmoil due to George's sister, Susan. Before the wedding, I tried to greet Susan, but she was too busy to meet, so our first encounter was at the wedding. Since George's parents had passed away, it was a simple ceremony with friends and relatives. Susan stood out in various ways, wearing a pure white dress that emphasized her cleavage at a wedding and sporting heavy makeup like a stage actress. She reeked of perfume. I tried not to show my disgust, but Susan either noticed or didn't like me from the start. She didn't greet me and mocked me. "George, couldn't you find someone better at your workplace? Such a plain Jane as a sister-in-law is embarrassing. Come on, sis, well, maybe she suits you. Mr. Super Serious." George looked ready to confront Susan, but a sibling fight on the wedding day seemed like a bad omen. "I'm fine. Let's go and prepare." I forced a smile and led George to the staff. That was our terrible first impression, but I didn't think much of it, expecting to meet only at occasional family events. However, the situation soon took a drastic turn. After a short marriage, due to her husband's infidelity, Susan unexpectedly moved in with us. "My ex left and I want to move out too. Our parents sold their place when I got married, so I can't go back to my parents. Can I stay at George's place for a while?" George was visibly frustrated with Susan's call. "Seriously, why don't you rent an apartment? You got a lot of alimony, right? Just let me stay until I find a nice place. I want to take my time choosing, not settle for some rundown house like you guys. But 20 years old, really. Even if it's got a yard and a garage, I wouldn't want it. It's earthquake reinforced and remodeled. Just rent a weekly apartment. Kidding? You're so serious. I'll be there this weekend. My lease is up." In the end, Susan showed up with her stuff and settled in without asking. The main problem was her lack of awareness that she was being taken care of by us. Susan acted like it was her own house, causing George and me considerable distress. Susan would go out every night, sleep in until the afternoon, and then spend the rest of the day lounging on the living room sofa, playing with her phone or mindlessly watching TV. This routine would continue until she went out again after dinner. I sometimes took a day off and stayed home, so I know this was her daily routine. When I would come home tired in the evening after a full day's work, Susan would ask me in a dissatisfied tone, "Hey, is dinner ready yet?" "How long till it's done?" "In about 30 minutes." "That long? Hurry up, will you?" She would also make snide remarks about my cleaning, saying things like, "You're not very good at this," or "You're cutting corners." "I share the cleaning duties with George, you know. He's tired too." "As a wife, you should be doing all the household chores." I didn't want to complain to George about Susan and worsen their sibling relationship, but he eventually noticed my growing unhappiness. When George asked, and I told him about Susan's behavior, he became furious. "Listen, Susan, don't you dare overstep your boundaries. You're just a guest here." "Oh, I'm just stating the obvious," Susan replied nonchalantly, "and start contributing to the household expenses. I'm still in shock from my husband's cheating. How can I work in this state? And you want to charge me. You can afford it with a $100,000 alimony you got. You have enough money to buy clothes and go out drinking. I don't need my brother telling me how to spend my money." With Susan acting like this, both George and I were exasperated. My dream of a happy married life had turned into a nightmare because of Susan. George and I had wanted kids soon, but perhaps due to the stress over Susan, it just wasn't happening. We were discussing getting checked when I discovered I was pregnant in our 4th year of marriage. Tears of joy streamed down our faces. George took this opportunity to suggest Susan move out. "Susan, we're going to need more space when the baby comes. Maybe it's time you moved to your own place." Then Susan turned to me and asked, "Alice, what are you going to do about work?" "I plan to return to work after a year of parental leave." "Well, I can look after the baby." "What?" "No, we're planning to use daycare." "Don't you know everywhere around here is full?" After inquiring at the city office and asking other moms at work, I found out that even the non-licensed daycares had over a year's wait list. "See, I told you so." A few months later, as my belly began to show, Susan smugly said, "I'll take care of the baby until you get a daycare spot. I owe you and I'll do it for free. It'll be tough on your finances if you quit your job." After discussing it, George and I reluctantly agreed to let Susan help. Honestly, I was extremely anxious, but surprisingly, Susan took great care of our newborn Joshua. She prepared well by looking up childcare information online, took care of his meals and daily needs, and even took him to parks and community centers. She devoted herself to Joshua. It was evident from how much Joshua adored Susan. Even after our second son, Ethan, was born 2 years later, Susan's dedication didn't change. With George and me busy with work, we were grateful for how much she helped with the kids. But as the boys grew, they started to avoid us more and more openly. Joshua, Ethan, want to go to the amusement park at the end of the month. "We're going with Susan." "How about we go out for a barbecue for Ethan's birthday?" "Susan already took us to a fancy barbecue place for my birthday. We're going to a high-end sushi restaurant. Can't wait." George and I felt torn seeing our sons so excited about spending time with Susan. Even after Joshua and Ethan started elementary school, we were grateful to Susan for spending time with them on our workdays. Even on weekends when George and I were home, Joshua and Ethan stuck close to Susan. They didn't try to talk to us and acted like it didn't matter whether we were there or not, playing games and going out with her. Things got worse as Joshua got older. He would blatantly show his displeasure, ignore us, or even click his tongue when we tried to talk to him. Once, Joshua started eating while playing on his phone, and when I reprimanded him, he glared and snapped at me, "Shut up, old lady." For a moment, I couldn't believe my ears. Man, it would have been great if Susan was our mom. She always gives us money and takes us places. Yeah, totally. Being born to parents like ours was a total bust. I was shocked by their words, but tried to stay calm as I responded. Susan doesn't work, despite being healthy. She doesn't contribute financially and just spends her ex-husband's alimony. So what? That's a lifestyle to aspire to, Joshua said, looking dreamy, but like Susan raised us right, complaining about her seems weird. Yeah, you guys didn't really want kids, did you? What? No, George and I always wanted kids. Susan offered to help until we found childcare. I was desperate in my denial. I can't believe you'd say that to me. Joshua smirked at my choked voice. You guys are always so annoying, telling us to do homework, saying we play too many games. Yeah, Susan gets it. She says it's fine not to do homework and even stays up with us playing games till dawn. I snapped back, annoyed. Susan has no responsibility for your futures. Your dad and I say these things because we're worried about you, even if it means you'll hate us. Yeah, right, you're just jealous because we're close to Susan. How stupid. Maybe you shouldn't have let her take care of us. I felt like crying. Looking up, I saw George standing at the doorway, his fists trembling. Who do you think you're talking to? Oh, hey, Dad, working late again today. Must be tough. Yeah, for such a measly salary. That's so true. The boys laughed mockingly, leaving George speechless. Finally, you talk to us, and it's to mock your parents, George. Stop being so loud, Susan called out as she came down from her room and appeared in the kitchen, shrugging her shoulders in annoyance. Getting worked up over what kids say is so immature. It's because you spoil them that they're like this, George exploded. I've had enough. Get out, now. What? I've been nice to my nephews, and this is the thanks I get. If you're going to stay, then pay your way. Susan puffed up her cheeks. Fine, I'll leave. Happy now? Susan, you're really leaving. No way. Susan quickly agreed, went to her room to pack her things in a suitcase, and came down to the entrance. I put my clothes in boxes. I've arranged for movers this weekend. Leave it till then, okay? Susan, are you really going? Yes, take care. She smiled at Joshua and Ethan as they saw her off to the gate, then left. But it was too late to bridge the gap between us and our sons. As teenagers, Joshua and Ethan became more rebellious. Joshua quit his job within a month of starting after high school, and 2 years later, Ethan followed suit, quitting his job after just a few days. They bragged about starting a business together and engaged in dubious deals, spending money from odd jobs in a single night. After a huge fight, George kicked them out of the house. When you get a job, come back. No way will we ever come back to this place, they retorted, and so Susan, who had stirred up our family and the sons she influenced, Joshua and Ethan, left, and it was back to just my husband and me. I worried about how Joshua and Ethan were doing, but without the three of them causing chaos, I breathed a sigh of relief. At the end of that year, as I was about to leave work and head home, I received a call from George's colleague. Are you Ellis? George collapsed at work. What? He's currently receiving treatment in the ICU at the city hospital. I understand. I'll go there right away. I felt like I was about to panic, but I ordered myself to calm down and drove to the hospital. I identified myself at the ICU reception, waited in the hallway for a while, and then the automatic doors opened. A man in a white coat, presumably a doctor, appeared. As soon as he saw me, he lowered his gaze to the floor. We did our best, but I'm sorry. I was speechless, overwhelmed by shock. I stood there in place. This morning I had seen off George as he left for work, just as always. Keep your schedule open for our anniversary next month. Sure, the usual restaurant. I have a surprise planned for this year. It's the same restaurant, though. I never imagined that such a mundane conversation would be our last. It felt like my field of vision suddenly turned completely gray. Am I the only one left living, wondering if there's any meaning to it? As I pondered ominous thoughts in the back of my mind, I decided to contact everyone anyway, Joshua, Ethan, and Susan, and informed them. George has passed away. I left a voicemail and I also sent a message. That night I received a return call from Joshua amidst cheerful music and chatter in the background. It seemed like he was having dinner at a restaurant. Joshua, your father has... My voice trembled as I spoke, and Joshua replied with a half-laugh. The funeral and stuff, I'll leave it to you, Mom. Someone who kicked us out like that, I don't even want to see his face. Yeah, we're having fun here, so don't bother us. Oh dear, George really made himself unpopular, didn't he? I could hear Susan chuckling in the background. Just tell the relatives we're absent because of work. Say hi to them for us. Wait just a minute. I stood in shock for a while, holding the phone. Are these people really George's sister and sons? Filled with emptiness, I knew I had to proceed with the funeral arrangements. I contacted George's relatives and the funeral home we always use and arranged a family funeral. The sudden farewell felt unreal, and I couldn't shed a tear during the funeral. However, as normal life resumed, the reality of losing George hit me repeatedly. While preparing dinner, setting up to record a TV drama we used to watch together, making coffee, I'd inadvertently prepare for two or start talking to him, and then realize George was no longer there, and I couldn't stop the tears. A week after George's passing, I was watering the flowers in the garden when the mailman's car arrived. I took the mail and went inside. Among the direct mail, I found an envelope addressed to me and was instantly taken aback. The distinctive handwriting was unmistakably George's. With a rush of emotion, I opened the envelope. First, it explained why I was receiving this letter. I entrusted an old friend to post this in case I passed away. Then, after a heartfelt message of gratitude for the years we spent together, there was a line that caught my eye. Please read this without our sons finding out. My heart swelled as I continued reading the letter. I felt a warmth in my eyes, realizing George had seen how much I worried about the kids. I wiped my tears and made a decision. I had to respond to George's feelings. Susan, who had trampled on our family without care, and Joshua and Ethan, who refused to attend their father's funeral. Just you wait. I won't let it end like this. I immediately took action. George's letter said there's a package for you in a safety deposit box at the bank near the station. Use the enclosed key to retrieve it. I leave the rest to you, Alice. Using the address in the letter, I went to the bank and entered the safety deposit box room beside the ATMs. Following the instructions nervously, I inserted the card into the slot. After entering the PIN, a square part of the table opened, revealing the safety deposit box George had rented. I used the key to open the box and check its contents. Sure enough, everything George mentioned in his letter was there. I put them in my bag and left the bank. Later, I invited Susan, Joshua, and Ethan to my house. I wanted to share George's inheritance with everyone who was important to him. With that excuse, all three of them came eagerly. Without a doubt, the word shameless fitted them perfectly, skipping the funeral but wanting the inheritance. How audacious could they be? Susan, who couldn't wait while I was making tea, blushed and started talking. That stingy, low-earning George had an inheritance, huh, Susan? Maybe he had hidden assets because he was stingy. Thinking about it, being stingy might not be so bad. I wonder if he transferred his inheritance to some account. Anyway, I'm excited. Then Susan smiled at me. You did the right thing letting your sister-in-law know. Well, I suppose Mom stopped beating around the bush. Is Dad's inheritance jewels? Maybe gold bars. As the three of them fidgeted, I smiled. Before that, please listen to this. I placed an IC recorder in George's cell phone on the dining table, which made Joshua, Ethan, and Susan look puzzled. Dad's cell phone, and what's this, an IC recorder, right? The kind used for investigating affairs? I've seen it on TV. Wait, did Dad? Joshua started laughing crudely, but his face stiffened as soon as I pressed the play button on the phone. Joshua's voice came through, talking to a friend on the phone. Yeah, remember that old lady you met at our house, Susan? Her name is... Joshua was speaking in an obviously cheerful tone. She wears so much makeup and clings to me, calling me Joshua dear. It's gross, but she'll hand over money if you flatter her, you know. There's a use for fools and old ladies. In front of a frozen Joshua, Susan's face turned into a picture of fury when I stopped the playback. Susan asked in an angry voice, "What was that, Joshua?" "I don't know, a stranger maybe? Or did Dad record that voice?" Joshua tried to play dumb, and Susan yelled at him. George was too tech-illiterate to do something like that. "Oh, I just remembered something I've got to do. I'm leaving," Joshua said, while Susan and Joshua were arguing. Ethan tried to sneak out, so I promptly presented the second recording. "How much money did you get from Susan?" $22,000. "Dan, I only got $10,000. What did you do?" "Gave her a bouquet of roses and a high BR bag for her birthday. Maybe I'll give her a fake brand. She can't tell the difference." "Yeah, you're right." Joshua and Ethan laughed. "She lives for being showered with gifts by men, even at her age, almost hitting 60. Yet she still thinks she's young, believing every flattery from men she meets at the bar and splurging a fortune on them. She's an easy target, stupid, really." The two slanderers knew no bounds. "The blonde hair is laughable, too. She dreams of marrying a young Korean pop star despite the age difference. Even as a joke, that's just creepy." In the midst of Joshua and Ethan's laughter, the recording abruptly stopped. Ethan, with a forced smile, muttered defensively, "Man, when did Dad record this? And to expose it to Mom after he's gone, that's just mean." "Yeah, pretending to be a good guy, but those are the ones you can't trust." Even now, they were spouting insults about George, which made me furious. As I was about to speak, Susan shouted at them, "You dare mock people who do you think raised you since you were kids? Don't mess with me. See, that's what's so annoying about you, always acting like we owe you." "Exactly, doesn't it feel empty saying that?" laughed at by Joshua and Ethan. Susan's ears turned red with anger. "Now it's your turn, Susan. Having a favorite bar to go to? That's quite nice, isn't it?" As I reached for the IC recorder, Susan's face tensed up. Without hesitation, I pressed play. First, lively music, clinking glasses, and a man and woman talking. Then Susan's high-pitched voice overlapped. "That's right. I've had my nephews wrapped around my finger since they were little. Filled their heads with all sorts of nonsense about their parents. Kids are easy to manipulate." "Oh, Susan, you're so clever," praised by the man. Susan spoke proudly. "I'm single. I need them to take care of me in my old age. Look at my nephews. Handsome, right? True, they look like models or pop stars." Impressed, the host grew more talkative. "I dream of my nephews feeding me, taking me on amusement park dates, even changing my diapers in the future." "Oh, wow, going into a facility? No way. If I'm going to be looked after, it's by handsome men only. Can't wait." I stopped the playback and looked at Susan with Joshua and Ethan's piercing gaze upon her. Susan turned away, so both my brother and his wife had nasty hobbies, recording such things secretly while gallivanting around so much. "I heard from relatives and got curious. After all, alimony from your ex-husband should have run out after 20 years, yet you remained unemployed, so I hired a private investigator to look into your background." I explained, and this is what was recorded. "Susan, you really are quite a character." "No, not funny at all, creepy old lady. What do you think of us?" As the sons cringed and hugged themselves, Susan's eyes narrowed in anger. "Shut up. I did indeed dote on you, spent my precious time and money. What's wrong with expecting something in return?" "Spent money." "Oh, you mean this?" I spread a bank book on the table, making Joshua and Ethan's eyes sparkle. "Oh, is this finally the inheritance?" "Well, sort of." I made a suggestive remark and looked at Susan, who was sweating coldly. This time, her face betrayed a desire to flee at the first opportunity, her eyes darting around as if seeking an escape. I addressed Joshua and Ethan. "Remember what I told you before? George had cut ties with his father before we got married." "Yeah, I remember," Joshua nodded. "Our grandfather, Dad's father, didn't work seriously despite being wealthy. He relied on the family fortune and racked up a huge debt." "Yes, that's right. George's mother worked herself to death paying off those debts, right, Susan?" "Yes, I cut ties with him too after becoming an adult. though I did attend his funeral." Susan nodded. "So, afterwards, the inheritance George received from wealthy relatives, he kept it a secret and deposited it in an account for you three," I explained. "Huh? We never heard about this. If there was money, why didn't he tell us?" Joshua asked. "He planned to proceed with the inheritance once you started working seriously, but before that, someone used it without permission," I said. Joshua and Ethan simultaneously turned to look at Susan. "No way!" Ethan gasped. "Yes, Susan had been taking George's bank book and seal without permission during his lifetime and withdrawing money." The two apprehensive looked at the bank book and recoiled. $200,000 down to $10 in 1 year. "Hey, what did you spend it on?" "Well, this guy convinced me there was a great investment opportunity. I thought I could double it and pay it back. I just borrowed it, that's all." Susan wriggled as Joshua and Ethan exploded in anger. "Don't joke. That was supposed to be our money," Joshua exclaimed. "Just $200,000, and you're making a fuss, considering the effort I put into raising you. You should be giving it to me for free," Susan retorted defiantly, causing Joshua and Ethan to bristle with anger, veins popping on their foreheads, ready to pounce. "But that's not all, Susan," I sighed, spreading Joshua and Ethan's bank books on the table. "You both started working right after high school, so the college funds were left untouched. I was going to give it to you once you started working seriously, but this too was meddled with." Seeing only pennies left in their accounts, Joshua tore at his hair in frustration, and Ethan almost cried. "Dan it, woman, what you're doing is criminal," Ethan exclaimed. "Yeah, we'll sue you," Joshua added. "Don't be silly, it's called family theft, and doesn't count as a crime when done by a relative." Susan crossed her arms and legs, laughing irritatingly. "I'll pay it back someday, maybe in the next life." "Oh, you can be charged for it. That's why I called the police earlier." At my words, Susan's eyes widened in shock. "Huh. Indeed, relatives living together can't be charged for crimes, which is why George kicked you out, planning to report you." Dumbfounded, Susan asked me in disbelief, "You betrayed your husband's sister." "Well, yes, that's what happened." "Huh, really? Unbelievable. After all I've done for you, how ungrateful." "Who's ungrateful here?" I yelled back, silencing the room. I glared straight at Susan, unleashing my fury. "Because of you, our family is a mess. It's beyond repair. What are you going to do about it?" "Overreacting much?" Susan shrugged. "I should have never trusted Ed. I should have kicked you out sooner." Then Susan turned to Joshua and Ethan, spreading a sinister smile across her face. "I wanted to be a mom. Since I couldn't become one, I thought I'd take your mom away from you too, out of spite." Joshua and Ethan looked terrified. "Are you okay in the head? Just stay away from me for good." "That's a problem. I came today to borrow money from you." Susan smirked. "We're family, so we should help each other in times of need, right?" "Yeah, right, Mom." Suddenly, Joshua and Ethan, who had been furious moments ago, put on a smile. "Actually, we're broke too. Got fired for talking back at work, for taking a little unscheduled break. They're so arrogant," Ethan and Joshua complained bitterly. I felt a headache coming on. "Getting fired is what you deserve." "Why?" "Yeah, we got kicked out of our apartment," Joshua casually revealed. "Didn't pay the rent, so we'll stay here for a while. That's okay, right? And cover our debts. Once we're debt-free, we'll start working seriously." "Can't you lend us about $40,000? You're working after all." Faced with their brazen request, I felt a rush of anger. "Don't mess around. I have nothing to lend to heartless sons who skipped their father's funeral." I vehemently refused. But they persisted. "Please, Mom, if you keep this up, I'll report you to the police too. Don't ever set foot in this house again." Just then, a police car's siren stopped in front of the house. Susan, trying to escape in a panic, ran into the police officers at the front door and was quietly taken away. "Dan, are we going to get arrested too?" "Let's just get out of here for now." Joshua and Ethan glanced at me, standing firm, gave up on asking for money and left. Joshua and Ethan, realizing that the money and allowance Susan had given them came from George and their own savings, seemed to have finally lost all affection for Susan. "I don't want to end up like them," they said, seemingly deciding to work seriously. However, their laziness didn't disappear overnight, and they kept calling me alternately. "Mom, I'm being pressed for payments at the bar. Can you lend me some money? I blew it all on horse racing. Can you lend me about $100,000? I got so annoyed that I blocked their contact information. Later, they tried to ask other relatives for money, but were shunned and denounced as heartless for not attending their father's funeral, leading to estrangement. Eventually pursued by debt collectors for borrowing from shady sources, Joshua and Ethan woke up and started working seriously. However, they had racked up so much debt that they were banned from the nightclubs and bars where they were regulars, now shunned, even at their favorite drinking spots. "We've lost all the fun in their lives," they complained. Susan, being a first offender, paid a fine and was released quickly. However, the incident led to her being dumped by her boyfriend. Moreover, after repaying the embezzled money from George's, Joshua's, and Ethan's accounts, she ended up with a huge debt. Susan now works from early morning till late at night, looking exhausted. What I kept secret from Susan and my sons was that George had left another item in the safe, a large pink diamond necklace, a prestigious heirloom passed down from his mother. As mentioned in his letter, it was intended as a gift for our 30th wedding anniversary next year. Fearing it might be found and sold by Susan or my sons, George had kept it in the safe. When appraised, it was valued at $240,000, to my astonishment. Of course, I wouldn't sell it. It's a treasured gift from George. Though I longed for a warm family, things didn't work out with my sons, and I lost my husband too. But George's memory is still alive in my heart. Moving forward, I want to live strong, cherishing the memories of George.